of compliance right now, what's really the goal for the future? And that's what we're willing to look at as professional managers, because it is our livelihood. It's the livelihood of the 7 to 10 plus thousand homeowners that we all represent. And mind you, our community members. When we talk about this as a community, we are trying to do our fair share and our part. And the ordinance outlined is acceptable, but where do we go next? Where do we push our community together in the future? Because I think for us as individual residents and individual business owners, it's been a good process, but it's also been one that we've realized that we're in a position that we can also be very much taken advantage of. A $2.5 million start to that budget should be very much well for the town. Understand that comes out of people's pockets. They might have to come out of our pockets from a homeowner's perspective if they fight. So we just need to continue this collaboration together. The Hilton Head Vacation Rental Alliance is here and is funded. So we want to work together, but understand that the future is just very key. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions out there, comments out there?
Just one more quick question. Again, Mark Carey from Michigan. I saw the word conviction come up on the screen. Can somebody explain the process of a conviction, how that comes about?
Cool. Curtis, could you answer that?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm Curtis Coltrane. A conviction arises when a citation has been issued for some violation of the town code. The parties appear in magistrate's court or don't. If they don't appear, you're likely to be convicted because you didn't show up. If you do appear, there'll be a hearing of some sort, evidence will be presented, the judge will decide what he wants to do. Conviction is when you are found to have been guilty of whatever is charged in the citation.
Thank you. If there are no other questions by the members of the citizens here, back to the council. Any questions by members of the council? Comments? Tammy?
Well, because I guess it's the same question that I have over and over. It's how we get from the monitoring station getting a call of a complaint or a concern and knowing and where that goes. So the monitoring system gets a call. They pick up from their list and they say, oh, that belongs to owner X. And owner X is given a call, or his agent, who, and they're asked to please remedy the situation. Then the monitoring system calls them back within an hour or so and says, hey, is everything good? Or they call back the complainant, I'm not sure. And they ask, is everything okay now? And if everything is okay, then all's well and good. But there's a record of that kept, so we know historically how many of those for that property, other properties are coming through. So that's good news. But that's not a conviction. That's just, so just getting to that question. So a conviction really doesn't come into play until there's one of those complaints that aren't managed properly through the monitoring phone call and the owner's or agent's response, but then continues and lingers, correct? Okay. And then how many of those complaints before it's determined that that's a conviction? Well, not a conviction, but a citation. And then you have two citations, and then a citation and a citation is two, but then on the third citation, comes what Mr. Coltrane just explained to us, correct? I'm confused. Sure. You can, it's the same.
Just back to no. A citation is when the code enforcement officer shows up for whatever reason, writes a citation, just a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
The ticket is the citation.
Right.
The citation results in a hearing in the magistrate's court. The person who has received the ticket can show up at the hearing.
Right. Okay.
Or the person may not show up.
Right.
If you don't show up, you're likely to be convicted. If you do show up, maybe not. But so the citation is the ticket written by code enforcement. A conviction or not happens following the hearing in front of the magistrate.
All right, so then, correct me, has there been a change in the ordinance where it came instead of in front of the magistrate's ordinance, it comes before council at some point? Did I miss that piece?
I believe in, Curtis can correct me if I'm wrong, the portion involving council is the consideration of suspension or revocation of a business license or the short-term rental permit, which are two different
Okay.
issues. Yes,
So I
ma'am.
think that's what people are confused about. If I'm still confused, but I think this explanation might be helpful. So we go through the process that Curtis just explained. So the citations are written, magistrate's court makes the conviction, magistrate's court goes through that 2 times, and then there's a 3rd time. And that's what triggers the potential for suspension of the permit. And it's not the license that's being suspended, it's the permit.
I think it's confusing because there's a lot of options, which is intentional. So when we get to the point where there are 2 convictions, that opens one of the options that we have, that the town council has to consider suspension of the short-term rental permit. And then the short-term rental permit allows for the hearing, which could be for the revocation of the short-term rental permit before town council. The existing also are the existing statute, or the existing requirements in the municipal ordinance, which allows for the consideration of suspending or revoking a business license. So you've got 2 options. You've got a lot of, town council has a lot of discretion in determining when they would consider suspending a short-term rental permit or a business license.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, it certainly is more clear to me, and if that's my biggest question right now, is that clear to I want to know if that's clear to everybody who is going to be the one subjected to this, right? For the most part, I think that everyone does the right job managing their properties and the rest. And we all say that these wonderful people exist because these wonderful people do exist. This is necessitated by those who aren't. And so if you're those who are, then there should be nothing, as Mr. Christopher mentioned, that anyone should have any concerns with. And from this line of explanation, it also should be quite apparent that it takes a whole heck of a lot to get to the point where before you're losing your permit or potentially losing a permit or a license. So if we could all just work as good neighbors, we would be so much better off. None of this would have been necessitated, but because we have the complaints from our residents and from our part-time residents and also from our visitors who come here and expect to have a peaceful, quiet vacation, that it brings us to where we are today. In terms of the parking, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of failures on the town's part when we do, in our LMO, when we do permitting. There should be a change in our parking standards for new house permits and several other things for that matter. And that's what, when I refer to the things that in Phase 2 should have been put as part of Phase 1, I'm talking about. Those are things that town needs to look at more closely and quit setting up the scenarios where we fall into these difficulties down the road. Correct them beforehand, and we won't have so many difficulties later. I don't like regulations either. And while I don't think this one is a great one for a lot of reasons, I do think that we need to start putting some arms around the fact that our residents have asked for our help, and this is a first step towards that end. And so, thank you for the explanation. I hope for my benefit, but I hope for everyone's benefit, it's a little bit more clear now.
David? Anybody else on the council have any comments, questions? Krista, call the roll.
Mr. Brown?
Support.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ames?
Yes.
Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Lennox?
Yes.
Mr. Stanford?
Yes.
Mayor McCann?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll take a 5-minute recess now. Okay, let's bring the meeting back to order. We're waiting for Ms. Becker. Okay, Mr. Orlando, it's yours, sir.
Yes, sir. Mayor, Council, hello, good afternoon. I will say, as I was sitting up there, as I was sitting in my chair, I looked out at Ann and realized, wow, she's a tough act to follow, so remind me not to go after Ann ever again. Great job. I'm proud to work with staff of Ann's caliber and others. So here tonight, or this afternoon, to present to you the fiscal year 23 proposed consolidated budget. So just to start out, the presentation has considerable information in it. I will move along as fast as I can and as fast as you allow me. So I can pause for questions. I can talk to you after you've made your motion. Scheduling, first reading tonight, potentially workshop, second and final reading in June. So talk about those things. So know that this is not the first time. We've released press releases to let folks know that we're not having a first reading tonight, and everything that I talk about from here on out will be on the website immediately following this meeting, inclusive of this presentation. So with that, thanks for having me. Talk a little bit tonight about our island's economic factors. We heard about some of them this afternoon. I always set out to really put my arms around the budget goals. You know, what are we trying to accomplish other than just balancing a budget? I'll present the budget to you, and then I'll talk a little further from a timeline standpoint about your review and approval process. So it's hard to believe, but a year ago I sat in the council conference room and presented to you the budget the first time virtually. And so a year later, as I was going through last year's presentation with staff, with John Troyer and Erica, this was in there. And I left it in here to remind us that we have been through quite the journey with the pandemic. And so ICMA reminded us that we needed a plan for 6 to 18 months. And I'll fast forward. Moody's credit report on 4/26 included that we are through it, and their credit quality has withstood the temporary turbulence. And I would just like to point out that we had a plan in place, it was carefully followed, and the decision-making supported where we are today. So good job to all of us. So a little bit about our economic factors. So I'll let you read the left side of the screen, but we know that the economic strength and growth that underpins our healthy tax base helps with our reliable financial performance, right? We have a AAA bond rating from Moody's that was just verified and validated once again, and we have a AA plus from Standard & Poor's as well as Fitch. Not many communities in this country have that type of credit quality. We have a growing tax base, we're fiscally prudent, a great financial position, and we have modest debt, and I'll explain a little bit more of that. But you see on the left side of the screen what we're managing in terms of visitors, size of our island, and household income, let alone the median home sales price. That jumped out at me. That was provided by the Realtors Association, $799, almost $800,000 median home price based upon recent sales in 2021. So budget goals, far right side of the screen, we've seen that before. It came straight from the strategic plan. So as adopted, as our plan, the comp plan was adopted, and we've always said it's going to guide the strategic plan, and then the strategic plan will be influenced by the annual operating budget, and the annual operating budget will influence the strategic plan. So it's cart and horse at the same time. And then strategic management. So I've said to you, I want to establish its town council strategic plan. We know what those different goals and priorities are, from pursuit of excellence on the top left and down to the bottom right, Parks and Rec. And we focused on those in the strategic plan. As another budget goal, I've also said that, to staff, we need a very lean operating budget, and we continue to refine it year over year. That we enact the town council pledge to reduce the 5-year, $5 million emergency management millage. That customer service, innovation, and employee engagement are always enhanced and focused on. That we have impactful community infrastructure investment. And you'll see in the budget where
I believe that aligns. And then last but not least, that we have a resilient community and that this budget is a catalyst for everything that we see from our partners in our community. So a little bit about the budget. So tonight I present to you $119,501,114 consolidated budget. I'll use this a little bit. So you can see that general fund increases 10.5% and debt service is flat. CIP, capital projects, is up 63%. And our stormwater utility fund is increased at a 6.1% this year over last year. Some high levels, and I'll dive in a little bit, but some high level simple explanations. General fund includes more use of ATAX, state ATAX in this general fund budget than year past, as well as it includes the short-term rental fee we talked about today, that Ann talked about, as an explanation or at least a rationale for that 10.5% differential. And the CIP, the cap projects, a 63% increase. That is because the unspent dollars in this fiscal year will roll forward into next fiscal year. So more or less the same budget from last year from a number standpoint, with the exception of those revenues I've just explained, and we can dive in a little more. So budget revenues overall, and I won't go through all this today, but know this is on the website and we have other opportunities to review it. And I know that as a town council and community, you're always looking for the percent change up or down in the justification in the budget. You'll see it's an entire schedule of our revenues, $119,501,000 in revenues. And you'll see the different various types of revenues down the board. Transfers in and prior year, actually transfers in are itemized on the right side because that's a lump sum, large number, a $25 million change, but those are our CI, most of that is our CIP fund. So they're transferring in this fiscal year. So you see that transfers in are a majority of our revenue, is why I explain it that way. Property taxes make up 18%, business license franchise fees 10%, and so on and so forth down. In the consolidated budget, debt service, personnel and benefits, park management, roadway management, and various other budget expenditures make up the budget. But I highlighted those larger percentage uses of funds in our budget. And so you can see it from a percentage overall, but then you will also see in the spreadsheet here on the page that $119 million proposed budget provides for personnel and benefits all the way down to stormwater modeling and analysis. So take a breath. So I know that there'll be other opportunities, and I'm open to answer any questions on these schedules, but I'll move on for our sake tonight. I've pulled out of that, extracted some budget highlights, and I'll share those with you. So the priority-based budget, well, I would say that this budget is priority-based based on our strategic plan. And I want to make a point that this budget started with available revenues rather than last year's expenditures as the basis for decision-making into this budget. And so I took the strategic plan and realized that if we're going to be priority-based, that we have to prioritize services, do the important things well. There are some significant improvements to our programs, one of which is simple: beach parking and monitoring, right? Question past patterns of spending. There were a few department heads that scrubbed their budget 3 or 4 times to take down those budget line items so that we had dollars to do other things with this year. And we'll always question that. Spend within our means, know the cost of doing business, and provide transparency and focus on the results. So when I say priority-based, we have a little bit of a rule book and some checks and balances the way we think of our budget. This is a year that reduction of property tax millage occurs, the five mills. So 5 years ago that was in place. So millage reduces from 28.1 to 23.1, an 18% decrease. Our finance director added the exclamation mark in there. The budget's balanced with, responsible revenue projections amidst a record high revenue collection period. that we have funds in the budget for enhanced resiliency planning, programming, maintenance of our public spaces, parks, roads, open spaces, stormwater, corrective and routine maintenance, as well as a significant investment in capital projects. We will continue to invest in our long-range community planning initiatives, the baseline assessment, the growth framework map, and the district planning inclusive of the Mid-Island District and beyond. I've mentioned that we've reduced various line item expenditures. We've increased fund balances due to prior year unspent funds. And then you'll also see in the budget a proposal to increase, or I would say improve, the fund balance policy, knowing that we continue to increase our unspent funds and our fund balance. There's enhanced revenues in allowing some growth and some impact to pay for that growth and impact, one of which is short-term rental fee. The other, you just tonight passed a first reading extension of the transfer fee for real estate transfer fee, EMS rate increase, and of course, we're continuing to collect economic-based revenues, business license, short-term, business license, hospitality taxes, taxes. I've also proposed that state tax funding be included in the budget more in general fund and capital projects than last year, and I'll show you what I mean by that. I've proposed some additional positions. Full disclosure, I've never proposed this many positions all at once before, but I want to share with you that I think it's important to get our arms around some of our programs. As you look at this, there aren't positions all over the board. It's the Director of Public Safety that would be effective July 1, sooner than later, if we are going to implement and improve beach parking, short-term rentals, and some of our management of our existing program. I've asked for 4 additional code officers. It'll be a 7-day-a-week program. There'll be modified hours at different times of the year. I've asked for those positions, 2 effective in July and 2 effective in January for operating and programming reasons, as well as availability or funding availability reasons. A short-term rental business license customer service manager, a CIP program administrator, an open space program coordinator. So a lot of festivals, events, heritage, environment, partnerships, opportunities, and a lot of plans that are being put in place that an open space program coordinator on board would help us today more than they would 3 years later arriving. Facilities tech, a fire rescue support staff. The facility tech is self-explanatory. The fire rescue support staff would be for emergency management. It would be for addressing, and it would be for some other support elements of the fire rescue department, inclusive of help with a new chaplain program that they're bringing forward, as well as a stormwater project manager. The program includes interns. As you know, I strongly believe in interns as well as seasonal staff. So I hear in the past and understand in the past we used to have seasonal workers. I think our seasonal workers, there's some that are on board already within this budget, this current fiscal, have already started to pay dividends for us. They're there, they know what they're doing, they're part-time, and the training has been more advanced and quicker than we anticipated. It continues to support the funds for beach ambassadors, as well as some seasonal tech or some seasonal facility technicians. And then there's some funds in there for staff class and compensation, assessment, and calibration. Millage rates, just a simple graph, I think more for the public to find this online, but you see the millage rate over time, how it fluctuates from 20.83 in 14 to 23.1 today. And you see that the mill value grew from 846,000 and change in 14, and it's as strong as 940,512 today. I would assume that before we blink, that's going to be over the $1 million mark. Strong position. So just real quick, what does this mean to a property tax bill, and how do those revenues generate for the town of Hilton Head Island? So a property tax bill based upon a $500,000 home value at a 4% assessment nets about $462 of operating costs in our general fund. And so I think it's always important to let the public know, we're doing a lot in the budget. The millage has decreased, and you'll see the millage here decrease. The Town of Hilton Head Island Disaster Recovery millage removes. I think that was about $100 impact, but everything adds up. So a little bit about state ATAX. I'll explain. If you look at the far right, oh, that didn't help. Yeah, if you look at the far right column, you'll see that state ATAX, South Carolina ATAX, a requirement is to transfer dollars to yourself first, 25K first, 5% of ATAX, and then transfer 30% to your DMO, your destination marketing organization. So you see, based upon our calculations or projections, that's a $3.6 million transfer this year. That's based on South Carolina code. The next is up to the town, right? So, well, we qualify based upon collection and those formulas in state code. We've asked for the use, and I'll look at these two bottoms for a second, that we transfer $3.1 million to the town CIP for projects, ATAX applicable projects, as well as $2.4 million and change to the town general fund for those elements that are impacted by tourism. And it could be across the board, I'll explain to you. That still leaves $2.98 million available for DMO and community-related ATAX grants, right? So Town Council and ATAC Committee in 2021 had available $3.3 million. Last year, because of projections, there was 2.5, and this year is strong at 2.9. And I know that's a further discussion at a later date. So for clarity, state ATAX, 2.4 in general fund, 3.1 in CIP fund, and you can see what I'm requesting to be funded up here for general, public safety, facilities management, cultural arts, as well as capital projects, pathways and maintenance enhancements. And I think you'll see a huge difference in some of our CAP projects and some of our programs as a result. And of course, a local ATAX investment straight into our general fund of 4.7, almost $4.8 million. So that being said, our budget's made up of 4 different funds: general fund, stormwater utility fund, capital projects fund, and debt service fund. While it's a consolidated budget, we manage each fund differently and separately and combine them as we present the budget. So general fund is our operating account. It's property tax, business license, ATAX permit fees, and it's our ops for public safety, interagency funding, and whatnot. In a general fund budget, a request, let me do this right, fiscal year 23 proposed budget is that third column down, a $30 million proposed, or I should say a $48 million proposed budget, $48.6 million. You see that salary and benefits make up 62% of that budget. Operating makes up close to 30%, contracted public safety 5.5, and you see our affiliated agency investment $2.291 million. So you can see from the pie chart, salary and benefits always is and is this time the majority of a general fund budget, and you see affiliated agencies and the others. So general fund expenditures from those affiliated agencies, this is the first year that we have that affiliated agency funding request process in place, right? These requests came to Finance and Administration Committee. They were passed through committee to me for inclusion in the budget, and I just want to say thank you to the folks that put those applications together and explained to the town why those funds are important, and to the Finance and Administrative Committee, Mr. Lennox, with your leadership. That process is in place, and I think it's a more sound, secure process leading into budget. But for time's sake, I won't go through everyone, but you see that in the general fund budget, there's a $2.291 million ask and receipt from those agencies above. So where are we spending some of our general fund dollars? Again, I'm going to continue to say a lean operating budget. Some professional development for employees, leadership development programs, staff training, certifications. We have some funds in there. Apparently it's someone's birthday this year. It's Hilton Head's 40th birthday celebration, so we're excited about that. There's some funds for open space and facility maintenance, an island-wide illustrative master plan and growth framework. A lot of this stuff should sound familiar. It is. It's in the strategic plan. And then we're going to increase our focus on community code enforcement as a proactive partner in the community. It funds the Office of Cultural Affairs, and while this funds every department, right, whether it's fire rescue, community development, finance, HR, I wanted to be clear that it also providing some additional funds for cultural affairs for our Lantern Parade, the Crescendo production, which seems to grow and become bigger and more advanced and every year, a free symphony, and other community events. And then one thing that I haven't mentioned yet, and I will give so much credit to staff here, this bottom line, I'll slow down on it because I think it's important, and I talked to you early on in the budget goals about increasing our level of service. Funding to provide translation services to and from most languages. So telephone and on demand, Zoom on demand, as well as in person if we can schedule, and written translation of documents within a few days. So thank you to Angie Stone. Thank you to the whole team that put this together for consideration in this budget. General fund budget expenditure highlights, more of it, up to 3% for salary-based increases effective July. Last year they were effective December. A 401k retirement plan contribution from 11% contribution from the town to 12%. A MedFlex reimbursement from $800 to $1,000. A new option, and it's to buy back earned vacation time up to 25 hours per year. We, of course, have to cover and will cover the South Carolina unfunded mandates for health insurance and fire rescue retirement. A proposal to increase the island resident stipend for Beaufort County Sheriff's officers from $350 to $550 per month, and some funding for town staff, class and comp, including fire rescue. So our revenues are pretty clear. It's showing the general fund revenues, and you can see the majority of the revenues. And for, again, time's sake, I won't share with you, but some of the major ones. Local A tax increase this year. If you look at fiscal year 21 actual at 5.5, we had a very conservative projection last year due to COVID and the economy concerns. So while it's showing a 19% increase, our proposed this year projected 4.7 is still less than the local A tax actual in 21. Business license, ditto. So 10.4 and a 10.6 budget, while we projected less last year due to COVID. And so we can go down that list. Permit fees are up 48.8%. That's inclusive of the short-term rental permit fees in here. And you also see some of those other dollars. State aid tax up 44% in the budget. That's an extra $750,000 of transfer in. So for clarity, $2.4 million of state aid tax proposed into the general fund. So some highlights, record high level revenue collections, short-term rental program we talked about today, includes state aid tax funding. And we replaced the need for the town to apply for A-tax grants after the budget adoption. And I think that's an important and exciting improvement. And the business license revenue increase. Our hospitality taxes are used to fund the lease of the fire truck, the proposed rate increase for EMS services, and we are not using any fund balance for the proposed general fund. So no savings for recurring expenses. So over time, I think this is interesting to take a look at. On the far left, 2019, on the far right, fiscal year 23. And you can see that our revenues continue to, for the most part, increase. And we are carefully and always monitoring them. I know that our finance director is in regular communication with our Finance and Administration Committee Chair, Mr. Lennox. Thank you for all the time you put into this. Right? We really study the revenues more than we just allocate those expenditures. And I know that there's a lot of work that goes into that along the way. And you see that general fund increases. So I mentioned this early on in terms of fund balance policy. Far left side is our existing policy, and the right side is what I'm proposing this evening with a lot of hard work from Mr. Troyer. Our current policy allows so general fund reserve policy limits. Currently, it's 1% of your budget. So it allows a range from 35% to 40%. We must have or should have by policy a general fund reserve based upon the matrix of general fund. So what we're proposing is that lower level and higher level increase. So I'm proposing a 40% basement and a 55% ceiling. It's based on our actual fund balance growth. And so you can see that the green line as an actual falls at 52% currently, and it's well above a 35 mark, right? It's well above this side of the screen. It's well above 35 and it's well above 40. And so I'm here tonight to present that differential. And I think that helps us long-term. It helps us with our credit agencies. It helps me, it helps John, and I think it puts in place a good policy. All right, diving into Stormwater Fund, we know that the Stormwater Fund are for stormwater-related expenditures, including staffing, operations, inventory, modeling, master planning, routine maintenance, and cap projects. That's a big program, and it's managed very well by Jeff Netzinger with a lot of help from Jeff Buckaloo and an entire great team. There's an overarching goal to improve and sustain our stormwater infrastructure, in addition to water quality within all the watersheds in the town. And the primary source of revenue are simple, stormwater utility fees. So this is a pretty primary budget, but I think the funds are something that we have to really take a look at, and you have a different look this year than you did last year at the budget as well as the priorities. So you see the percent change year over year. Some of it is skewed because I've moved some money around. We've budgeted this differently in the past. But if you take a look at these expenditures by categories, these are the expenditures you'll see systematically and routinely year over year in the future. So salaries and benefits make up 10% of the budget. For the most part, it's flat. They have requested an additional person. Operating, capital, inventory, modeling, and you can see corrective maintenance, systems maintenance, sorry about the typo there, routine maintenance and contingency, pump station maintenance, and the like. But you also see down here, transfer out to CIP. So what we started to do is transfer stormwater utility funds into the capital improvement program so they can all be managed the same way by Jen Ray and her team as a true capital project. So expenditures, you see percentage of use, of course, salaries and benefits, 11%. You start seeing some stormwater bond, interest and fees and principal at a 23% use. But inventory and modeling is at a 12%, POA systems, corrective maintenance at 11, public system corrective at 7, routine maintenance and contingency at 12. So I examine this a lot. I like to take a look at where we use our money, not just in those revenues. So if you take a look at the year over year budget, you'll see $5.8 million of request. $5 million come from stormwater utility fees. Prior year funds, $769,000. That's part of the transfer into CIP. So we're using some prior year unspent funds to transfer into the capital program, and then some investment income. Our rate remains very competitive. I think we do a lot with our dollars. Compared in the region, our dollars per are the highest. So it's nothing that I have asked for, nor would I at this point, in terms of changing that rate, but I always think it's important to take a look at our rate because that's what's generating our revenues. So service delivery, I think we should be clear, what are they accomplishing with those dollars? LMO compliance and MS4 permit. There's a lot of work that goes into that MS4 permit and that NPDES, really federal state mandate. Some inventory and modeling, routine maintenance, channel, street sweeping, pond management, pump station maintenance, there's 4 of them. Corrective maintenance in our public system and corrective maintenance in our private systems. The majority of funds are programmed for those strategic plan priorities, one of which is a SWOT analysis of our island resiliency. So how are we being impacted? That SWOT analysis is plugged into this budget, as well as those routine and corrective maintenance and cap projects. We've remained with the same rate structure proposal, no new vehicles. Very transparent is my goal and my expectation moving forward with where we're spending our dollars, and that the emphasis be on cap projects as well as corrective and routine maintenance. And then in this budget, some one-time, the monitoring, modeling, and island analysis, I think, coincide. So extent of service, you see our public systems in whatever color that is. Well, you can see Hilton Head Plantation, Port Royal, Indigo Run, and you see those are private systems. We have 17 agreements in place and 6 are pending. Those agreements that you have put forward as a model template are almost completely done. And then our public system, what does that mean? It means the town right-of-ways, the town easements, and town property. We know that there's state ditches, and we know there's county ditches, and we know there's private property, so things to work on. We have 59 projects planned this year. And I won't dive into all this, but it's for the presentation. You can see the CAP projects, Gumtree, Jarvis, Cordillo, Moonshell, and Wexford are our responsibility to address sea level rise and climate adaptation, a fiscal year 23 budget of $250,000 to measure our program against the climate action goals, to develop and apply insights, and a detailed monitoring of future scenarios. All that means is that it's going to allow us to accelerate our investments and establish initiatives to address those challenges. It's more of a playbook. We've got a lot of great work in place already. I think this will pull it together. Capital projects, jumping into the next fund. It's for the financial resources that are restricted and they're committed or assigned for capital outlay, including land acquisition, construction of facilities, and other assets. So CAP projects by definition are primarily non-recurring in nature, so you won't see all those stormwater projects in the CIP program, and that we define them to the best of our ability under the categories that they're greater than $5,000 except for roads, buildings, computer software, and that threshold's 50. And there's a whole bunch. There's significant and very strategic sources of revenue that allow our capital program. I'm pleased to present to you that our capital program I present tonight is fully funded. However, how did we get here? It went through prior year projects into an internal list and other sources that we would identify new projects. So as an example, we need adaptive traffic signals. Where did that come from? Well, that came from a series of meetings. That came from staff recommendation. That came from some citizen recommendation. I know a lot of you have, if not all of you, have talked to me about that. And so that would be added to a new project list for consideration. We balance our funding availability and ability to do the work and the projects. It went through Parks and Rec Commission for discussion, CIP committee for input, and then Planning Commission made priority recommendations based upon the South Carolina planning enabling legislation to prioritize capital projects. And I'm here to show you tonight what their priorities are, as well as show you the capital improvement program. And so overall, we've got a $45.6 million proposed capital improvement program. We see that third column, percent of budget, but really percent change is a little skewed because we're rolling things forward. I just think the numbers are important. Beach management, 2.8 million. Pathway management, 4.7 million. Roadway management, 8.1 million. Park management, 13.7, almost 13.8 million. Facilities and equipment management, 6.3 million. Fleet management, 8.1. That's inclusive of the fire fleet that you approved last year and some time ago as well. Land acquisition, 300. That's a placeholder. And then housing, 1.3, almost $1.4 million, making up a $45,671,933 CIP proposed program. Percentage of use, I think it's all important, but the pie chart quickly tells us what our priorities are in that budget. Our sources of fund are widespread. I think you can take a look at those to realize that pretty much every source of money, with the exception of general fund in this year's budget, help, right? Traffic fees, H-tax, different investments, and then the transfers in. Those are definitely important funds, from beach preservation fees all the way down to stormwater utility fee. So Planning Commission priorities It's a long list. I'm not going to go through it all, but I think it's important that we can state that what Planning Commission has prioritized is in front of you for funding and then some, right? There are some things that we wanted to fund, and I think that we're all doing a good job as a team. But, you know, they've prioritized facilities, fleet, land acquisition. I wanted to be clear where the projects are. So the labels here coincide, you know, if I'm sure I don't have to even tell you, Jen, Ray, and Taylor and a few others put this together. I'm sure it's part of their brand already. But they have project identifiers that coincide with the project list. So I'm pleased to show you that our capital program is intentionally spreading out and as a part of our island as it's known. So focusing on beaches and roadways, and I put this on here on purpose, just in case somebody asks if I put it in the budget. We actually even have a picture, and don't they say a picture is worth 1,000 words? So that's the adaptive traffic management camera. We're focusing on the sidewalks and pathways. Historic Mitchellville Freedom Park has made a request for some funding assistance. We're prioritizing our parks, whether it's Crossing, Chaplin, and definitely Mid-Island. We'll fund the fleet as well as other vehicles. We'll spend some dollars at our beach parks, our town facility, and our pathways. So I'll take a breath. This is the proposed capital improvement program. I think what's important for this evening, or for this afternoon, is that this be left with you. It be placed on our website for the community to view. And it, for the most part, funds the projects. But the way it works is if it's funded in 22, adopted and amended budget, we will be clear, it's clear in here, what's carrying forward. So as an example, $200,000 of fiscal year 22 dollars are carrying forward into the $100,000 of fiscal year 23 proposal to make for a $300,000 program or project, I should say, this year. We've been very clear, and I'm very grateful for Jen and Sean and a whole bunch of others that have been really clear to explain what fiscal year 23 scope is, right? I don't want to put up here 300 grand and somebody think we're renourishing the beach this year. It should be very clear. Ongoing activities to manage the beach, including resiliency, endangered species monitoring. And then what have we accomplished and what will we accomplish by the end of fiscal year 22? I'll pause on a couple of these, but at the end of it, they all equate to the proposed CIP. So park improvements, you'll see some funds at Dreesen, at Folly Field Beach, at Islanders Beach, Coligny Beach, and some beach park maintenance. I think that we've had a lot of success. I will add to my town manager report next month and discuss with Mayor a quick presentation to show you all of the enhancements that have been made at the beach. I mean, we have staff members that went to Lowe's to buy lumber to fix the boards. We've completely changed the flooring and ADA elements in some of our bathrooms. And I know that Aaron and Mark Robson and Keith and everybody involved are hard at work, so I want to share that with you. But there are some more dollars next year. Harbor Town dredge, as we talked tonight, anticipated in the budget. Pathway and maintenance improvements, and the new pathway segments, Shelter Cove, Woodhaven, William Hilton Parkway eastbound, and Jonesville Road. Dirt road acquisition and paving. We've been slow this year to get this program in place. I think that we've made some recent moves. We've refined the way we're going about our business, and I know that you will see a lot of activity between now and the end of this fiscal and in fiscal year 23 as we work to pave Mitchellville, Pinefield, Horse, Sugar, and Alice Perry Drive, Freddie's Way, and Alfred Lane. William Hilton Parkway enhancements, if you wonder why you've just recently been invited, and I apologize, it's a lot of meetings, but if you wonder why you've been invited to the 15 or so stakeholder meetings this week, it's to kick off the planning of some of that. So it's crosswalks, lighting, turn lanes, curb and gutter, pedestrian vehicular enhancements. Definitely our gateway corridor is separate and aside. The adaptive traffic signal management is in here, as well as Dillon Road right turn lane. So anytime that we work on a road, we need a plan, we need an encroachment permit, and we need to work closely with Beaufort County and DOT on that. So a lot of that meeting that we're having this week is scoping and designing this, I wouldn't say all at once, but in segments, so that we're not issuing different contracts on every single one of those elements. We're thinking bigger, and we're solving the corridor issue, not a project at a time issue. You'll also see some dollars in here for streetscape enhancements on Pope, Palmetto, and Arrow, ditto to what I just said. Also adaptive traffic signal management on all of those intersections. So to sum it up, we have the adaptive traffic signal management planned and funded. We're going to apply for a grant, but it's funded either through a grant and or our funds and others. 100% of every signal on Hilton Head Island is the plan. So I just want to be clear about that. Main Street, we're continuing to work on Main Street. I think we're getting closer. Squire Pope and some others. And in Mid-Island, I'll pause at some of this. We have some dollars in Mid-Island, and you can see 1.7 planned last year, 1.2 carry forward, 4 million new funds for a $5.2 million investment into the Mid-Island tract for next year. Chaplain Crossing, Shelter Cove, I call it phase 2. Chaplain Linear, we're going to connect where we're leaving off right now all the way to Matthews, and I think there's some creative opportunities there to add some pedestrian elements, some pathways, some safety off the road, as well as potentially even some really creative overlook, and I think it adds value. Patterson Family Park, I think we all know why that's taking a little bit of time. Artifacts on the site, we're looking at it, and I think there'll be a great park when we tell that full story. Taylor and Barker Field. Well, there's money plugged for Barker Field, full disclosure. I won't spend any dollars there until we transfer that park to our asset list. And I've been working closely with Mr. Greenway at the county to make that happen. Stay tuned. I think I can jump through some of these, but you saw them. The Island Rec Association CAP project requests, a public art program, the recurring funds, $25K, general park enhancements, town hall security and facility. We programmed some dollars in for town hall last year. We continue to spend those dollars. You will soon start seeing a different makeup for you as you get into the room, as soon as I think we can get some of this equipment off the barge, wherever that's sitting. You see that we're going to spend a little bit of money on town facility, sprinkler heads. We did a structural report in the building, and we have some, I would say, priority projects just to invest into this building for the time being. Shelter Cove, Beaufort County Sheriff's Office, it needs a roof, it needs some upgrades for desks, EV charging stations at our town facilities, implementing our master plan for parking. We just got through the RFQs last week, and we'll bring that to you soon, but there's some dollars in here contemplating and anticipating moving forward to that. Coastal Discovery Museum. I mentioned historic Mitchellville Freedom Park. Ahmad contacted me and asked for some funds to improve the parking lot, and I think that will go a long way, especially with ADA spaces and pathways and the like, and the lease allows for that, so you'll see some investment there as a proposal. IT equipment, public safety, systems equipment, security cameras at some of our spaces where there's gaps, including town hall, including some parks, fire medical systems equipment, and you can read through those. Some work done at Modern Classic Motors. We're working closely with John O'Toole on that. Fire hydrant expansion. Arts campus feasibility remains in the budget. I think we need to figure out what we're doing, and I think we'll look at that a little closer when we start thinking of growth framework and master plans. Some stormwater projects. I mentioned the stormwater projects in the stormwater fund as a transfer. Some vehicle replacement of vehicles that are more than 10 years old, as well as new vehicles for the staff members I asked for. fire rescue apparatus and vehicle replacement, as well as housing, and we talked about that. Last but not least, debt, and I'm almost done. 20 more slides. Just kidding.
No, you're not.
Like 5. But debt accounts for the accumulation of resources for the payment of interest and principal on our long-term debt. Primary sources, you can read them: property taxes, transfers in, beach fees, H-taxes, SWU funds. So this year, $19.3 million requested, with principal at $16 million and interest at 3.2. If I do pause, it's here. We will, in 24 months, pay more than $30 million of principal off our debt. So congratulations to everybody involved. I inherited a Ferrari. It's fun driving it. And I just think it's tremendous, especially as we take a look at the pie chart and to take a look at where our revenues and expenditures are being placed. And just for public full disclosure, you see the final payment on some of our debt, 2025, 2024, 2023, 2023, 2023. So we're getting really close to paying off some significant sources of debt, including one more under the special obligation bond. So $15 million debt reduction in 21 and 16 this year. No new bonds are planned. 5th year in a row where our net debt declined. Our budget includes GO and special rev bonds, and our 23 budget's very similar to our last year, in that we're proposing to keep the debt service millage the same, and no new bonds are proposed. We always continue to seek refunding opportunities. I know John works on that. I don't think that's going to be as successful right now in this climate, but we always monitor. We've got a great team. The town will issue the lease for the fire trucks upon receipt, so that's coming. And then stormwater bonds are paid through stormwater funds. So all in, $119,501,114 is a consolidated budget. Tonight, first reading at your direction, a council budget workshop on May 10. I know there's a hold on calendars, and then a contemplation of June 7 for second and final reading, as well as public hearing on the budget. So,
Any questions by members of the council? Mr. David? Yeah, put your hand up. Oh.
I'm exhausted.
that was the goal.
Great presentation, and I'm glad you gave credit to Jen and Taylor and so on, because it really was an amazing work of art. I think it's important for me just to share with you sort of my high-level reactions. I'm very encouraged because of the direct alignment between the strategic plan and the expenditures and the priorities. I feel that is something that is somewhat new and important in this 2-year program. It's going well. I also think that your commitment to planning is incredibly important and drives where we're going to invest and establish the priorities, so I think that's good. And I certainly support what appears to be the acceleration of capital investment for the enhancement of brand and for the general quality of the community. I think that's very helpful. I like it when you use the word programming, maintenance, and enhancement of the public realm, including facilities, roads, parks, and open space. Public realm is, in my opinion, perhaps the most important area for an opportunity for improvement, to send a message not only to residents but also to our visitors. So I think that priority is good. I like the fact that you have recognized that recruiting and retaining employees is incredibly important, and the cost of living here on the island necessitates some acknowledgement. I will note as a sort of tangential thought that only 34% of our employees either choose to or afford to live on the island. If we were to go up to 50%, we would have to build housing for 90 dwelling units. 40% would be 60 dwelling units. It sure seems to me that at some point, we ought to recognize our employees and work towards increasing that percentage from 34%, which I think is unfortunately low. You also mentioned enforcement in the budget, and I think that's a strong indication of what we as a council have been hearing now for a significant amount of time. Enforcement in a number of different areas, and I'm glad to see the personnel and emphasis there. Finally, the strategic dimension of the budget is impressive, but I also want to congratulate you and the staff that there is an obvious appreciation of the importance of details, the attention to details. And I'll use an example. As I drive off of 278 onto New Orleans Road, my tires used to hit 3 holes every time I turned that corner. Today they were filled. I truly appreciate the fact that the town is paying attention to that level of detail. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Lennox?
Good job, Mark. I think it's important for the community to know that this is not the first time we've seen these numbers. Mark and John Troyer has met with each one of us individually and gone over this same presentation and gave us the option and the opportunity at that time to ask for more detail and ask any questions, which we all did. Subsequent to that, we had access to both Mark and John for further questions, and I assure you there were many, many hours post that first presentation where we interacted with either or John and Mark. Since the pandemic hit, one of our biggest concerns was, since we haven't experienced anything like this in the history of Hilton Head, what impact will the pandemic have on revenue? We didn't know. John Troyer came to Finance Committee armed with monthly financial statements with emphasis on revenue. The town has traditionally been very effective in managing expenses. I wasn't worried about that. What I was worried about, however, was what's going to happen to revenue in a pandemic. Well, I think you'll see by the fiscal year 2020, 2021, and soon 2022, this economy is enormously resilient, and the business owners and those that do business on the island figured it out. Mm-hmm. They were able to maintain a level of revenue, if measured by the accommodations tax, hospitality tax, beach renourishment fees that we collect as a town. If measured by that, you look at financial statements and you don't see a pandemic. And I think that we all ought to take great comfort, at least in what we've been through so far. And it's the Great Recession, back-to-back hurricanes, and now a 2.5-year pandemic, that this economy is resilient. And I feel good about that. CIP, $45 million. How long would it take you to spend $45 million on projects? Don't think for a minute, even though the CIP in this budget has $45 million in it, half of that is roll forwards from projects that were approved and funded in 21, 22, that are yet to be completed. And that's in there. It would take us, given the current state of the labor market, it would take us 2 or 3 years to build $45 million worth of CIP projects. Although it's in there, it's not going to happen. What I really feel good about, however, is that $45 million is funded. It doesn't make that list unless there is an identified source of funding for it. Very aggressive, and I think it's in tandem with our strategic plan. Lastly, you'll notice that reserve balances are building. Mark and staff have elevated the required reserve levels for the general fund up appreciably. And it's not our business to generate revenue from the community to build reserve funds, not at all. However, if you recall Matthew and Irma, Matthew cost us about $55 million, and that was a baby storm that gave us a glancing blow. It cost us $55 million just to clean it up. That wasn't to reconstruct anything, that was to clean it up. And given today's dollars, John, is that north of 70? And that's only a Category 1 storm. So I think as I look at the accretion and accrual of the reserve funds, I think that's prudent risk management in that if we get hit again with a small storm like Matthew, it's going to cost us more. If we get hit with a more substantial storm, it's going to cost us a lot more. I can say after monitoring revenues for 2.5 years, this is a very conservative approach to revenue. And I rely heavily on the town manager and town staff to manage the expense side. If that happens, I think this is doable. Good job.
Thank you, sir. Alex?
I was getting a little nervous because wondering about you taking notes, but you have given that directive to Mr. Grubasi, so we're in good shape.
Because I forgot my pen up there.
Yeah, it's okay.
I didn't want to interrupt. Josh has my back.
I say that deliberately because I want to make sure that everybody understands that you are very attentive to our concerns and the public's concerns, okay? And I'm happy that we'll be moving into a workshop to speak to this a little bit more intimately. The financial policies that you've included in your memo, okay, measurement of focus and a basis on accounting. It also talks about accounting and financial reporting, okay? And I got to thinking about those, and it's almost like commentating a sports game, right? I mean, you got the statisticians in the background giving us the numbers. The numbers matter, right? But ultimately understanding who's going to win or who's going to lose is much more exciting to us, right? The way that you are presenting is more so in a way, not so number-based, but understanding where we're moving as a community. And I applaud you for that, and we'll continue to get better at that as we move forward. The one thing I wanted to say, because this is our first time together when it comes to discussion, so I did want to say out loud in support of what Councilman Ames mentioned about those that work for the town of Hilton Head and that live in the town of Hilton Head. And I had 40% as far as town employees and 33% fire and rescue. That's a metric I think that we need to pay attention to. I don't know what the new number should be, but it should be higher than those, okay? I'm in support of us giving additional monies to the sheriff's office, okay? But I must say that when it comes to the sheriff's office, we have to make a call most times to see them. But when it comes to our town employees, when we walk in the door, they're here and they're ready to go. And I think that's important that we recognize that. I think it's important that we give them the opportunity of ownership of our community. If they choose to live somewhere else, that's fine. But if it's a cost thing, we need to start looking at filling that gap to some degree. The last one, and my papers got shuffled here a little bit, so I don't know if this holiday schedule was a part of the budget, or yes? Part of the budget. Okay, well, there's one that's missing, that's a federal holiday, and that's Juneteenth. And I think that's up for us to discuss and hopefully add to our schedule, with Hilton Head being the home of the first place of freedom in America. I think it's only appropriate that we add Juneteenth to our holiday schedule. Thank you.
Mr. Stanford?
I too am exhausted. I have listened attentively. I have attempted to go through the elaborate documents that you have presented to us, and my conclusion is we're having a $20 million increase in the budget over the previous year, a tax cut. The town is healthy, the community is healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Tammy?
Well, for you, I'd like to say thank you.
Welcome.
And thank you to staff who put this all together, and for the meetings and answering all of the questions. I'm not exhausted. I'm really super excited. I think as Mr. Stanford correctly pointed out, the state of affairs here in Hilton Head are bright, and we're in good shape. I'm proud to be part of this community, and I look forward to seeing this implemented in the coming year. I think Mr. Lennox said most of everything that I could have possibly ever thought of saying, and I appreciate him having done so. You did take the time to go over this with us so that we were clear. I think I have a better understanding of the budget than I ever have, and that's very important for each one of us to have that clarity. There are a couple of details that I'm still waiting for, and I look forward to receiving those. Thank you.
Bill?
Thank you, John. No question, excellent job. I'm not going to repeat all of the positive comments, all of the accolades. I would just say ditto what's been said. A couple of points I'd like to emphasize is I think clearly on the fund balance ceiling, moving from the 35 to 40 to 40 to 50, smart. I hope that's codified as a policy for the future, because as we've all said, we don't know what the future is going to be, but the people in Wall Street that sell us money or get us money as cheaply as possible look at that. So please stick with that. You're running your staff at a very fast pace, and the one issue that I see here is the vacation policy. Vacations are for rejuvenation, rebirthing, getting that creativity going, having people have the ability to accrue and accrue and accrue when they should be spending time renewing is something to think about.
Yes, sir.
I can't emphasize enough SIP being fully funded. Fantastic. On the stormwater, I'm not sure what the language means here in terms of inventorying and modeling. I think I know what it means, and very, very important. It's a key underground asset, an asset that needs to be reviewed on an ongoing basis and nurtured and rehab when necessary. New hires, you should not be apologetic about new hires. You're not going to accomplish what you need to accomplish in some of the new focused areas without people that can help educate and that can help evaluate and in some cases actually enforce. So new hires are important. And the last thing is the direction we're heading now, and with the capital momentum behind it, we need to tell our story better, and I know you're doing it now, much more so than we've ever done before, but to the capital markets. There are people out there that are looking for good investment. Public-private partnership opportunities are out there, and I think moving in that direction, 1 + 1 can equal 3 or 4. So I would encourage you to start thinking in a very deliberate way to the development world what you're doing. It is a good story, and that good story will bring more capital here in a very smart, sensitive, and creative way.
Thank you, sir.
Comments by citizens in the community? Heather, I thought you raised your hand, oh. Oh, okay.
I'll comment if you'd like.
No, it's okay.
I think it's great.
Please.
Did you say this presentation is on the website?
Yes, sir. It's going to be on the website tonight.
Yeah, stay up late, it'll be on tonight.
Thank you.
After the Yankee game. Any other comments out there? Well, thinking back here before the vote, I've seen Mark anguish for the last 2 weeks on changing words, changing sentences, and, I'm glad he didn't take any of my suggestions because it came out very, very well, Mark, and I thank you very, very much. The workshop. I need to know, Mark needs to know what you want to cover in the workshop.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I'm good to go.
You're good to go. I'll see you later then. Oh, you're not,
No, I mean, I personally don't need another workshop.
You don't need another workshop.
No. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, and I'm prepared to move this tonight for first reading.
You need another workshop, Tammy?
Well, I think the advantage to a workshop is that once the budget is presented to the public, I'm certain there will be thoughts and comments and suggestions, and I want to hear those and be able to present them as appropriate.
Mr. Glenn?
I think Tammy's point is well made, and that is that we will be hearing from the public, I assume, in this, and as we hear from that, we need to be prepared to respond to those comments in a public forum. If we don't get a lot of comments, then your education to us has been thorough and complete, and I'm comfortable.
Okay, so we're going to have a workshop. But what I need from everybody here is what they want to cover at that workshop. I don't want Mark to go over the same things we went over today. I don't want to keep on going over and over and over the same stuff till we find something wrong with it. Everybody's going to leave here and read, listen to people in the community say, what about this, what about that? I think that's what the workshop is for. So if we give Mark some information, what we want to cover, it will make for a better workshop rather than just go in there and waste a lot of time. Is that okay, sir?
Yes, sir.
Christian, make the call.
Sir, first I need a motion to approve. I need a motion, sir.
Move it.
I'm confused.
Need a motion.
I can read.
Apologize.
I can say that I am very pleased to move for the approval of the 2023 proposed consolidated budget on its first reading.
Mr. Glenn? Okay, Mr.
Mr. Brown?
Support.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ames?
Yes.
Mrs. Becker?
Yes, with the caveat that I am still waiting for a little bit of information. I hope to get that, and we'll be all good, and so yes.
May I clarify what that information is? It is, as I got into the strategic plan, I mentioned that 100% of the strategic plan is funded. So as we look at our document, you'll see elements in there that are fiscal year 21 starts, fiscal year 22 starts, and fiscal 23 starts. I did make the claim, and as directed, as you adopted the strategic plan, I would fund those fiscal 23 elements. What Ms. Becker has asked for is that we slow down and make sure we're scoping the project so this project scope is very clear before we just run down the street spending dollars, spending time, because there's so much of it. What the mayor and I had talked about is a strategic plan mid-year update. We planned that for July. That same date in July it was at least a hold for is the Municipal Association Conference in I believe it's in Charleston, so we have to work on a different date. But I fully intend to work with you to scope those fiscal year 23 projects for clarity. So, does that help?
That's
All right,
exactly.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Roll.
Mrs. Becker, what was your vote again? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lennox?
Yes.
Mr. Stanford?
Yes?
Mayor McKim?
Yes.
Motion carries, sir.
Have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All in favor, aye. Thank you very much, gang. Thank you all.